And it is on this day, January 28th, 2025, that we're doing a little fun activity here that I am very excited about. But before we get into the activity, I have a few disclaimers I want to say at the beginning. It feels a little weird to do the disclaimers before explaining, but I feel it is appropriate to make it very clear where the disclaimers are. First disclaimer, there are no spoilers in this video. I will not spoil any of the books I have read, and I will not get too into any of these characters that you see on the screen. I will not reveal their plots or anything like that. I will introduce their name and their book they're from, and I will not share anything about them. I might say that their arc is boring or like interesting or something like that, like generic terms, but I will not tell you about their character. So there are no spoilers in this video. The second disclaimer, equally as important for the sake of this video, these images are not mine. None of them are mine. I tried my absolute best to try to pull from official sources for most of them. You can see a lot of Sanderson pins on here from the Sanderson website. You can see some pictures from the Expanse TV show, because that's also public access. And I tried to pull from official artists when I could. So like Mika Kuloda or Adam Mathison Sward, those are both official artists for the Dresden Files. But in some cases, I was really struggling to find art or some kind of reference, and so I will be linking all of those artists in the description below, with one exception, and that is Codex Alera. All but Kitai. Kitai's the exception here. But all of the Codex Alera images are from the Codex Alera wiki, which a few years ago, I think like 1 to 2 years ago, someone went through the Codex Alera wiki and made AI art of the characters. I want to say that they didn't have any citation of how they did it or where they did it or who did it. There's no citation I can find at all of the AI art, so I don't know who did it. I also want to say that some of them do look like the characters, a lot of them don't. Some of them, I don't know what information they gave to make the art, but like the art for Kitai looks nothing like Kitai. And it actually kind of frustrates me. And so that's why I used this other artist's art for Kitai to try to respect that. But a lot of these other characters have no art. Codex Alera is really lacking in art. I think it's like one of the series I've read with the least art, along with Powder Mage. Powder Mage, there's only this one person really who does art. So I have that person's art. Adamat and I guess I just have Adamat and Thomas, don't I? They also drew Olim, but I didn't consider Olim a main character. So, I just want to give that disclaimer. All the citations will be in the description. Third disclaimer. These are main characters, which we'll get into in the introduction as well. But I was very generous with the definition of main character. And there's definitely some main characters I'm missing, and there's definitely some main characters that aren't really as main character as I am explaining them to be. So just keep in mind this is my opinion. Goes into disclaimer number 4 of these categories are very opinionated. And this video is not solely about their character arc. It is also about just my opinion of the characters, how much I enjoy them. So, I think those are my 4 main disclaimers for this video. No spoilers, these images aren't mine. Main character is a very generous definition in here, and these are my opinions. So hopefully they'll be pretty straightforward. Now to introduce what we are doing today. These characters you see on the screen, these are all different characters from series. These are characters from the series I have read in the last 5 years. And it's kind of crazy for me to think about that I've really started my full journey into fantasy 5 years ago. I started reading Dresden more than 5 years ago. I think like 8 to 9 years ago. But Dresden was my first real big fantasy series I've ever read. And Dresden is what kickstarted my fantasy reading. And so I was thinking about it yesterday. I already had this idea in mind, but I was thinking separately, I thought yesterday, I've been reading fantasy and sci-fi officially for 5 years. And I think this is a great moment to reflect on the series I've read. And so here, all of these characters are from the series I've read in that time period. I will say Vasher is the only character from a standalone that is here. I wanted to include other characters from Warbreaker, like Vivianna. However, again, I could not find art that was spoiler-free, and I wanted spoiler-free images. So, only Vasher is here. I'm sorry for not including Warbreaker. Hopefully, in the future, maybe I can include Warbreaker. I wish I could draw, because I would have happily drawn all these to use for this video, but I do not have a lick of artistic talent. So, but Vasher is an exception here, and I do also want it to be known that like in series I didn't complete are not included here. So like Gideon the Ninth is not included here. Many standalones I've read, like Neverwhere, is not included here. Again, I wanted to include Warbreaker just because it's such a big part of Sanderson's books. That's why Vasher is here. But otherwise, these are all series that I've completed. And they're the main characters, or the main-ish characters. All the characters where you're in their point of view for a substantial amount of time, they are all here, as far as I know. And then the characters that are very important to the plot, which includes villains. There's some villains in here. I included them as well, because I think they are main character in some regard. Again, I think there's probably a lot of main characters I'm missing. My friend actually disagreed, saying that like maybe even half of these people are main characters and the other half are just side characters. I'm being a bit more generous on what a main character is, and some of them I included to indulge myself. I'll tell you that right now. Some of these are to indulge myself, but that doesn't mean they'll be in the top category. It just means that I think they belong in this video in some regard, because I want to talk about them. I think that they can hold their own against some of these others. So that is what we'll be doing today. For the 5 categories, we have I love every second. I love every second they're on the screen. I love every second they're there. I think that's a pretty self-explanatory category. Like, I am kicking my feet in the air every time they are on the page. That is the purple category. I think that's pretty straightforward. Blue category, they got a badass storyline. Like, they do some really badass things, and I love rereading those scenes over and over and over again. That is what the blue one is, with a little bit of generosity, but we'll get there. Green, they have some interesting developments. Like, they're really interesting character, and I like how they've grown, or how they've changed, or how I learned stuff about them. That's what green is. For yellow, by the way, I'm going in order, so if you have color blindness, I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, top to bottom. So, for yellow, this one, they kind of need a little more. It's missing something, or maybe it's just a little bit too flat for me. If they had a little bit more, then they'd be a lot more interesting to me, and I could see some like really good developments with them. But right now, they're just on the cusp of that. So that's yellow. And then for orange, the last one we have here, they were there. They weren't really that interesting to me. When they were on the page, I just was getting through their chapter. It's not necessarily that I disliked the character, it's just they weren't too interesting. They weren't drawing me further into the book, but rather just keeping me where I was. That's why I use the color orange here, is that none of these characters are really in the red category. I think few of these will even be in the orange category, to be honest. But orange is more like they really weren't that substantial, they're in the background, or they just weren't interesting to me. So, those are our 5 categories. And with that, I believe we're ready to get started. Now, we have a difficult start here. This is all randomized, so there's no particular order here. And we're starting with Kamina Drummer from The Expanse, which is one hell of a start. She's a character. It's interesting because she's both flat and round as a character. Kamina Drummer from The Expanse. I think we gotta put her in interesting developments. She has some interesting developments. She has some reveals. She can be badass, but she doesn't have like a badass storyline, and there aren't any particular moments I can think of that I would reread a lot, you know? She is need a little more. She kind of does need a little bit more content, but I can't tell you what more content she needs. So, I think interesting development for now. I do have the ability to move these later, so bear with me. There will be some shuffling, I'm sure. But I think Kamina Drummer in interesting development is very fitting. Next, we have Bernard from Codex Alera, written by Jim Busher. Oh, I should do authors. The Expanse is written by James S.A. Corey. And then Bernard from Codex Alera, written by Jim Butcher. Is also a difficult start. Why are we starting, like, really difficult here? Bernard... I wish I remembered him better. It has been quite a while since I've reread Codex Alera properly. I do have to give that disclaimer as well. Bernard. I think he had interest... Well, that's the thing, though. What were his developments? My instinct is to put him in an interesting development. I remember liking him as a character quite a bit. But when it comes to developments he had, I don't know if there were. It's weird because I really liked him, but I can't place why I liked him. I think I just did by default. I think it was just like how he talked. But now that I'm thinking about it, I do think he needed a little bit more as a character. He was kind of a lot of the thing is I'm comparing him in my head to the other Codex Alera characters, and a lot of the other characters have stuff going for them. Like they have a lot going on. He just didn't have a lot going on, as far as I can recall. Those are some keywords. So, I think I'm actually going to leave him and needs a little more. But he's going to be towards the top of that category, I suspect. Because I did really like him. I just can't place why. Interesting. Next, we have Alex Kamal from The Expanse, written by James S.A. Corey. Thinking. He's definitely in these three. I don't think he's purple. I think interesting development. So now I gotta compare him to Drummer. I really should like shuffle them at the end, but for now, Drummer or Alex. I do just have to flat out tell you I love Alex more. I do love Drummer. Don't get me wrong. I really do respect Drummer. But I think Alex's interaction with the main crew. Yeah. We'll revisit later. We have Elend from Mistborn, written by Brandon Sanderson. Controversial opinion, okay? I know many people don't like Elend. I don't necessarily know why. I loved him. I loved Elend. I think he was a very interesting contrast to all the other characters. And he grew substantially as a character throughout the series. Like, he grew a lot. He changed, I don't want to say entirely, because there was still, like, you could tell it was him, but, like, who he was changed so dramatically throughout the series that I'm going to give him badass storyline. There's a lot of scenes I would reread with Elend. Like, Elend really was, like, my favorite character in certain parts of the series. So, I think Elend deserves badass storyline for me personally. Which is a great lead into Shallan from Stormlight Archive, written by Brandon Sanderson. This is also hard because I'm in the middle of Stormlight Archive right now. I'm in the middle. So I'm obviously going to be biased towards the characters I'm currently reading. But Shallan is like, I love her. I love her so much. But I haven't finished her storyline. I don't know where her story is going. And so I can't put her in purple because I don't know that yet. I got to put her in blue. Badass storyline. And I do love her storyline. First book to where I am currently, I love her. She's one of my favorite characters, flat out. Just for her storyline, not even for like how she talks or her attitude or whatnot, but I love her attitude as well. But her storyline is very interesting. It's very in-depth, and it's one of the best representations of certain things I have seen in any fantasy sci-fi series. So, badass storyline. Hands down, no notes. Now we have Adolin, also from Storyline Archive, by Brandon Sanderson. This is going to be a controversial opinion because a lot of people love Adolin. But Adolin hasn't changed too much so far in the series. And again, this isn't a ranking of how much he's changed, but also I think he needs a little more. I really do. I need more from him to really compare to these other characters. Like, he could be it. You could really get me to love Adolin with a little bit more. But as he is right now in all of his story, I'm not really excited when I reach his chapters. Versus a lot of these other characters that we'll get to, and Shallan, I am excited when I reach their point of view. So, honestly, I think Adolin needs a little bit more for me. Which I feel bad saying, but it's true. So, this is a good start. I like this. We're kind of gathered in the middle here. Amara from Codex Alera, written by Jim Butcher. See, this is where it's starting to get funky. Amara had more than Bernard. My opinion of Amara jumped quite a bit throughout the series, which is something very interesting. I don't remember the specifics as to why. Bernard, here's the difference between these two. I'm just going to put them next to each other for now, because they're from the same series. Honestly, they're usually, this isn't a spoiler, they're usually together throughout the series, so that's why these two are probably going to end up next to each other. But I want to clarify that Bernard is a lot more of a flat character than Amara. Amara has a lot more arc to her, but her arc still needed more, or still needed something from me. I think her arc for me was more a sinusoid. Personally, I think Bernard I liked, I just constantly liked him, not much changed. So it's like, I like both of them, I really do. But again, comparatively to the other characters, they don't really hold as much of a flame for me. And my opinions of them changed throughout the series. So, and honestly, both of them are going to be below Adolin. I like Adolin more than them currently. So, maybe when I reread Codex Alera, they can get bumped back up past Adolin. But currently, with my memory as it is, I think this is pretty appropriate. I might put Amara higher just because she has more going on, very honestly. She really does, though. I wish Bernard had more. I really do wish Bernard had more. I would have loved him. Alright. Next. Miller. Miller from The Expanse. Written by James S.A. Corey. For those who know, for those who have read or seen The Expanse, I am including the full Miller storyline. You know what I mean. I'm including the full thing. Yes, it's a technicality. I do not care. I'm including all of it as Miller. And because I'm including all of it as Miller, badass storyline. I won't even lie, I loved Miller from book 1. Like, I loved him in book 1. Don't need to say anything else. But the full storyline is really fascinating. It's one of the more complex storylines I've ever read. I think ever. Now I'm starting to think about that. I think Miller's storyline is one of the most complex I've ever read in terms of just how funky it is, and I think that automatically qualifies it for the blue category, because it is already more than Elend. I can tell you that right now. Comparing to Elend, Miller's definitely more. And I did also just enjoy his personality and his speech and whatnot. And he's a detective, and I love detectives, so that's Miller. Badass storyline. Next, we have Bobby Draper, also from The Expanse. She kicks ass. She really does kick ass. That I'm torn between her and badass or interesting development, because she has some badass scenes. She really does. But again, I'm thinking about her overall arc. I think there were interesting developments, but there also could have been more to really push her across that line, like into the Elend category. For a while, she kind of just isn't there. And I think that's part of it. The Expanse is a very weird series for this, in that you jump between so many characters all the time. That's some characters that aren't the main crew, or aren't main crew, I guess I should say, you don't see as much, and so it's kind of hard to glean them in comparison. She's got more going on than Alex, I can tell you that. She definitely has more going on than Alex. I feel like Drummer goes above Alex. I love all the Expanse characters are like here, and then Miller. I think we'll leave it here for now, and we'll review it later. Dalinar from Stormlight Archive. I love him. I love him so much. I can't even like begin to express the last book changed my mind. Like I can flat out tell you, book 3 has changed my mind of Dalinar, and I don't think I'm ever going back. I loved him in book 1, don't get me wrong. I think it took me a little bit for me to get caught on, but I eventually loved him. In book 2, you know, he was there, he was vibing, he was very interesting. Book 3 though, oh, I love him. I love him so much. I've actually been kind of upset because he's not been in this book much that I'm currently reading. And I miss him. I miss him so much. So I think at that point, if I am ranting to my friends about him not being on page, I think that puts him in the love every second category. Because I really do love him. He is one of my favorite characters. Again, I'm biased because I'm reading the series right now, but he is a complex character. He's a character that makes you really put things into context, and really think about the characters you like. So, I love him. He goes in love every second. It's just, he's Dalinar. What else do you want from me? Next up, we have Vin. Vin is going to be funky. Finn and Kelsier are the next two, both from Mistborn, Era 1. Both of these are going to be funky because I had opinions. That is for sure. Vin has some interesting developments. However, she was unsatisfactory to me at times too. It's very like... It's not necessarily that she needed more. I just wish things were a little different for her. She has some interesting developments, but they weren't... Some of her developments could have been more for me, and they weren't. And some of her developments dragged her back for me in terms of like making sense to her character. I won't lie, there were times that she felt out of character to me. I think her character wasn't always consistent, and I think that's my biggest problem with Vin. I do need to reread. I need to reread Mistborn, And I do realize some of that is on purpose. I do recognize that. But there were just some scenes where I'm like, this just doesn't feel like how she's always been. It feels she's different. And so the consistency makes me really wonder, like, Adolin level? Is Vin Adolin level? I think she has interesting developments. I can confidently say she has some interesting developments. She changes as a character a lot, honestly. A lot. I just... Sometimes I got dragged back a little with Vin. Leading that into Kelsier, this is going to be a very, very controversial opinion. I wasn't a big fan of Kelsier. I think I said this in my Mistborn review. I didn't like Kelsier that much at any point. People really obsess over Kelsier. Like, there are, like, die-hard Kelsier fans out there. I think he has some interesting, interesting plot, I guess. I guess it's more so interesting backstory. But, to me, Kelsier was just there. He was a lot more of, like, a speaking guy than, like, a lot of other things going on guy. So, honestly, yeah, and I'm sorry. That is the truth for me. Kelsier was just there. Maybe, again, upon a reread it'd be different, but currently, sorry. Next we have Clubs. Clubs, to be fair, Clubs, I feel like I was stretching it to put him in here. I thought that putting the whole main crew from Mistborn would be main characters. I will say Clubs substantially has less content than all the others. And so I do feel bad putting him down here, but very genuinely, the amount of screen time he has compared to everyone else is so low. He does not get much attention. He really doesn't. At any point in the series, really. I think we see him the most in, like, books 1 and 2. So, he's going to be at the bottom here, and the reason why is because out of pretty much every character on the screen right now, he has the least screen time. Maybe. Probably. You just don't... And not even just screen time, but, like, talking time. He wasn't a talkative character, which means you just don't see him talking a lot. So, Clubs is just going to be down there. He's also from Mistborn Era 1. There's going to be a lot of Mistborn Era 1 characters in here. Oh my god, look who's next. I love him so much. I love him so much. It's bad. It's, like, actually, like, bad. This is Wit. That's the name we're going to use for the sake of this video. If you know his other names, you know. This is Wit from Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. He is among my favorite characters I've ever read. He is top 3, guaranteed, flat. No further commentary. In terms of the most enjoyable characters I have ever read, Wit is top 3. I love him so much. I lament every time he's not on the screen or page. You know what I mean. Anytime I say screen, I mean page. Every time he's not in the page, I am crying tears on the inside because I want to see him so bad and I want more content from him. Honestly, technically, he doesn't even have a right in here because he gets way less page time than all these other characters. But he is so substantial to the series and to Brandon Sanderson readers in general. You talk to a Brandon Sanderson reader, they know Wit. They know him. So because he's a main character in the fandom at that point, I included him. He is like top 1 to 3, probably top 2 favorite characters I've ever read in my life. I love him so much. I want to know so much about him. I want to know so much about him. I would do a lot to go out of my way to learn about him. If he had a book just about him, I would read it next. I would put down this book to read that. I'm not even joking. So, I'm just saying. He, absolute favorite. Love every second he's on the page. I love every second he's not even talking. He's just in the background. I love him. I love him so much. So, that's Wit. Gotta put Wit in there. Next we have Amos from The Expanse by James S.A. Corey. Amos is also a relatively flat character, which is what is interesting, but you learn about his backstory. I wonder if that counts as flat or round. If I guess it'd still be flat because they don't change much, but you learn about their backstory as you go, and that adds to their arc, right? I think... Oh, I forgot about the later books. You know, he kind of does have an arc, huh? Oh, but Bobby. Bobby or Amos. Bobby or Amos. It's funny because the two of them bicker all the time. Bobby or Amos? That's really tough, actually. I hate that all the Expanse characters are next to each other because they're so hard to compare to each other. A lot of them share a lot of similar qualities in a way. In a way. Fuck. I love Bobby. Like, in terms of loving them more, I love Bobby more just because she's Bobby. She's badass. She kicks ass. Not that Amos doesn't, though. Amos does have some interesting developments. I can confidently say Vin has interesting developments. Drummer has some interesting developments. Alex, I'm getting more uncertain about Alex the more we go. What are his interesting developments? Other than, you know, his big character trait. He is one of the more flat characters, isn't he? Honestly, he's pretty comparable to Adolin. Alex and... Like, both of them, I like them. I have respect for them. But they could have something more interesting to draw me in. They're very enjoyable, but their storyline could use something more to really draw some intrigue or really draw something else to them. Give them more complexity. Yeah, honestly. I think Amos has interesting developments, and I think Bobby has some interesting developments. So, this seems good. And then Elend, badass. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I just realized that we have Kelsier twice. That's what this image is. So we're just going to put him in the bottom. Oops. Oopsie. Ignore that. Then we have Jasnah. Jasnah Colin from Stormlight Archive. Her. Here's my problem with Jasnah. Here's the issue. This is kind of the issue I'm having with the Expanse characters-ish. Jasnah just doesn't have a lot of screen time. She's really badass. She's really cool. I love her. Don't get me wrong. I love her. I enjoy when she's on the screen. But we just don't know much about her. She's just kind of mysterious, honestly, because she's just always in the background or fuck off elsewhere. She's almost not a main character. She is a main character. She has substantial impact on the plot. It's kind of like Mab. We're going to get to Mab later. She's down here. But Jasnah and Mab are similar in terms of they're both very important, but they don't have too much time on the page. So Jasnah has interesting developments, but I think she needs a little more. God, the voice cracks are atrocious. I think if Jasnah has the more, it just hasn't been revealed, or it hasn't been presented in an interesting way. I think she has so much stuff that would really be interesting developments for me. If we just learned more about her, she would be an interesting development. And I'm sure I will at some point. This is probably will be the book I'm currently in that gets explained. But currently, I was actually kind of disappointed last book in her reveals. I thought that last book, this is one of my very, very, very few complaints about Stormlight Archive. Okay, there are very few. Don't get me wrong. I love the series. One of my very few complaints is from last book. I think Jasnah's reveals from the last book, I'm not saying the character, I'm saying like stuff about her, by the way. We're not getting to spoilers, just stuff that was revealed about her last book could have been presented way more dramatic. It could have been way more like, boom, like, oh my god. But he kind of just, it was kind of flat. How Sanderson introduced that information, he just was kind of like, it happened, and then moved on. And I'm still kind of shook about that. I think that could have been way more dramatic. It could have been interesting development, where it would have been a scene I reread over and over and over again. But instead, it was kind of plain. And I think that needed a little more. So I think we'll put Jasnah in needs a little more because of that scene in particular. I am still just shocked that he didn't commit to it and just go all the way into interesting development. He kind of flattened it out. I don't know why. I really do wonder about that. So, that's that. Thomas from the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. This is our first Dresden character. This is also going to be a controversial opinion. Okay, Thomas goes a little higher than Kelsier. Well, does he though? I won't lie. I used to, not anymore. I used to identify as a Thomas hater, so. But now I try to avoid hating characters without any real justification. I almost want to put Kelsier higher. Kelsier has some background stuff that kind of pulls him higher. He's closer to needing a little more, you know? He was just there for me. Thomas was just there for me. I'll be very honest. I think some of the plot that comes from Thomas's existence is very interesting, but in terms of Thomas's plot and his character arc, for me, he's just there. He is round. There is stuff happening and going on with him, but it's just not my kind of story arc. I know other people love it, which is great for them. But Thomas's arc, I'm really just not that interested. I don't think I've really been too interested at any point. So, yeah. Alright. Next up, I think the pause function worked. I want to put a disclaimer, but I don't know if the pause function worked just now. Next up, we have Waldo Butters from the Dresden Files. This is also interesting because most of the series you don't see him much, and then he really pops off. He pops off later. So he has interesting developments, bare minimum. Waldo has interesting developments. Honestly, I think Waldo is very underrated in the Dresden Files. He deserves a lot more love and respect for his storyline than he does. He had a presence in recent books. He has had more of an arc. Ooh, can I say that though? Hold on, wait, before I say that. Can I say he has more of an arc than Amos? Compared to Amos, Amos is very static. Waldo's very round. Waldo, oh man, Waldo just does have one fantastic scene that I could reread forever. It's such a good scene. But since that scene, there hasn't been many rereadable moments, so I feel that steps him down one. Because I could rewatch that scene over and over and over again, but his whole storyline is badass. It's a section of his storyline. So he has interesting developments. And his interesting developments are recent-ish. It bumps him down. I think it bumps him down below Amos. Drummer, this is like a pretty interesting matchup here, because both of them kind of pop off later. Both of their interesting stuff comes later. So there's kind of an analogy here. His one scene is much more dramatic and rereadable than any of her scenes that I can think of. It's funny because they're also both polyamorous and they're both next to each other, which is funny. At least headcanon polyamorous. I'm kidding. I think we're gonna go Waldo, then Drummer. Yeah. And then we'll try to speedrun this other one before my roommate comes in. We have Navani from Codex Alera by Brandon Sanderson. Navani is starting to become a main character. That's why I added her in here, because she is becoming more and more of a main character. Currently, for me, though, Navani's just there. I think she needs more. I think Navani has more going on than Jasnah in many ways, but also she is just kind of... She is just kind of there a lot of the time. She brings a lot of the backstory, the background, she brings a lot of world building. And a lot of what I love about Navani's chapters are the world building that she mentions, but that's not necessarily her as a character. Navani as a character is not my favorite. She's interesting, I want to know more, but especially compared to the other Stormlight characters, she is just kind of there for me. I think more than Kelsier, but she is just there. And then next, we have our first Powder Mage character. We have Ka-poel. Ka-poel is also, not like Navani, but like, Ka-poel is a very unique character compared to all of these other characters. She's a very unique character compared to all the rest of these characters. She's very hard to compare to anyone because of her circumstances. I love her. I don't love every second she's on the page. I don't know if her storyline is necessarily badass, because you're never really in her perspective. I think you're very rarely in her perspective. I loved her more than Vin, and I loved her more consistently than Vin. But she has less going on than Vin. I kind of want to put her in needs a little more, but also at the same time, I don't think she needs more. I think what she had was fitting of her character. How do we feel about that? Adolin? She's kind of like Adolin in that I love her and she's interesting. She's just kind of in the middle. She could just use a little bit more. Alright, we're back. We're going to start double timing these because I realized it's been 40 minutes. We ended off with Navani, I believe. Navani, Kelsier. I feel pretty good about where everything is. Next, we have Kaladin from Stormlight Archive. Also, again, by Brandon Sanderson. Kaladin, he is currently a character in the process of change in the part of the book I am in. I do love him. I especially love the first book. The first book, oh, shit. He has to go in badass. I just love his storyline, and definitely above Miller. Very hard to compare to Shallan though. Shallan, Kaladin. I gotta put Kaladin higher right now. Kaladin has more rereadable moments than Shallan does. We have Vivianna. Oh, this is the other Warbreaker character. I was wondering why I wasn't spotting her. It's because there's no white background. Vivianna. Warbreaker, in general, I wish there was a little bit more. That's my problem with Warbreaker. It's like, she was interesting. She had a lot going on. She learned a lot as a character. However, because it's one book, I guess, and because there's only so much in the book, I mean, I feel like I have to put her even below, like, Ka-poel. Her and Alex seem pretty, like, on par. Her and Amara seem pretty on par. So I think this is a pretty fair, putting her between Amara and Alex. As for John Marcone from the Dresden Files, by Jim Butcher, I know where he doesn't go. Now, a great question would be if he's in the top category of the second one. It's really hard because the last book really bumped him up. I feel like prior to the last book, he would probably be an interesting development / badass storyline. I feel like he'd be interesting development. The last book changed that. Bare minimum, he's badass storyline. I think I can't say love every second because he's just not on the page long enough throughout the series. He's only in like... He's in 10 of the 17 books, so, you know, he's there. Kaladin has a more badass storyline than Marcone does. Shallan has a more badass storyline than Marcone does. The thing about Marcone is he's a mystery, in part, but we found out a lot recently. I love him more than Elend, and I love him more than Miller. Miller has a more complex storyline. Ish. But Marcone is just a better character. In terms of how well the character's written, Marcone is one of my favorite characters in terms of how well he's written. He is always in character. He never strays from his character. He's a very well-defined character. You know who he is and what he believes. And it does not change. He is who he is. And so in that way, he's a flat character, except he's a flat character that is growing. So his beliefs are flat, but his environment and what he's doing is changing. And it is absolutely entertaining. I put Dalinar in top is the problem. Honestly... The fact is, I don't love every second of Kaladin. I just love most of Kaladin. I love most of it. But he is sometimes silly. Marcone. Shallan. Why do we have to have one of the hardest ones? Marcone. He's technically a bad guy, too, which is not helping this decision. He's one of those, like, villain, not villain characters, and that's why I love him. A lot of the best written characters that are going to be in the top are going to be enemy, villain, antagonist, insert word here. That's the reality. Some of the best written characters just are. Miller kind of qualifies as that in his own way. It's kind of strange. I love every second he's on the page. It's just true. I love every second he's there. The only reason I'll reread the earlier books is mostly for him. Kaladin. Kaladin versus Marcone. Both of them have moments I love to reread. We'll come back to it. We gotta keep going. We have to keep going. We have Thomas from Powder Mage, written by Brian McClellan, which is, I think, our second Powder Mage one. We had Ka-poel earlier. Thomas, bare minimum, is Kaladin. Thomas and Kaladin, very similar in terms of having, like, some of the absolute, like, badass, awesome moments, and I love them overall as a concept. Like, towing towards loving every second, but then there's just some scenes where it's slower and there's less going on. I think both of these are, like, both Thomas and Kaladin are, like, on the line here. Of, like, I could love every second. They just have a few moments where it's more of a lull in their character and there's less going on. But, like, Thomas, some of the most badass scenes I've ever read has Thomas. I just realized that I forgot a pretty important character from Powder Mage, and that's Bo. If you know who Bo is, I feel like I would put Bo in interesting development, if you were wondering. He has some pretty rereadable scenes, but not like an overall badass storyline. So, that's where I would put Bo. I believe this is Wayne from Mistborn Era 2 by Brandon Sanderson. I love Wayne. The problem is Wayne is interesting development because he doesn't do much. I think that's one of the things about Era 2 is that Era 2 is so much shorter than Era 1 of Mistborn. Like, so much shorter. It's harder to really get a glean on them. I do love Wayne, though. Like, a lot. I love his abilities. I love everything he does. His attitude, his interactions with people, his approach to things. He's a very enjoyable character. I enjoy him a lot. I'm starting to feel like I'm dissing Vin by putting her this low, because Vin does have some great stuff going on. But, I mean, we also have Bobby, Amos, and Drummer, and Waldo here. I at least love Wayne as much as Waldo. Wayne kind of has more attention than Waldo. I love Wayne more than Amos. He has more going for his character. And I think I love Wayne more than Bobby. I'm thinking a little bit about that. Very, very different characters here. It's really hard because Bobby's a very science fiction heavy character, and Wayne is a very Western gunslinger fantasy character. So it's like, it's really hard to compare them against each other. We'll come back to it. It's okay. Wax. Okay, so Wax is the other character from Mistborn Era 2 that I've included in here. Wax is going to go in badass storyline. Technically, it's what happens to him that is the badass storyline part, but it is part of his story, and it is in his perspective, and that is still one of the most emotional things I've ever read in a book. Period. Like, that scene, if you know what scene I'm talking about, is like one of the times I've cried the most reading a book. And so, by default, he has to be in badass storyline because that was devastating. That's one of the most devastating things I've ever seen in my life. So he's already above Elend. I think he's above Miller just because of how devastating that was. Wax versus Shallan. I think I just love Shallan more. She just has a lot more depth to her character. Not that Wax doesn't have depth to his character, but Shallan has had a lot more pages and a lot more words to have depth. again, Mistborn Era 2 is such a short series, we only have so much context for Wax and Wayne. So, I think above Miller is appropriate. Miller's going to move around later, I suspect, but we'll see. All right, we got Vasher from Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. For Vasher, I enjoyed him. I think he needed more. He definitely had more going on. I think, again, my issue with Warbreaker is he just needed a bit more. I'm going to put him above Vivianna, though, because I did enjoy him a bit more than her. I'm sorry, Vivianna. I did enjoy Susebron, but he's not on this list, so I apologize for that. Susebron, I was a fan of Susebron. I liked his story. I realized Vivianna was a key part of Susebron's story, so by that logic, Vivianna should also be higher. I realize it's Vivianna, or like Vivianna. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I know like how the name is spelled. I read the book. So, I don't know. I think Vasher and Alex, both of them, I respect them and I like them. I like reading their scenes. Just like, not a lot. There aren't like really big bits that I can recall that I like adore, you know, for either of those characters. Same with Adolin and Ka-poel and Jasnah. God, Jasnah has so much potential. Okay, it's fine. Spook. Okay. Spook from Mistborn Era 1 by Brandon Sanderson. Spook is a very deep character. He has a lot going for him. He changes a lot. I think it's arguable that he changes more than Vin does. I don't know if people agree with that, but I do think he does. I think... Here's what I'm going to say. Spook has a very deep storyline. However, I don't think he compares to these 6. Kaladin, no. Thomas, no. Shallan, no. Wax, no. Miller, no. Elend. Elend versus Spook is probably a genuine argument you could make. But the fact is, I did enjoy Elend more than Spook. Spook versus Waldo and Amos is a good question. I'm going to put him at the end here first. Spook, again, changes a lot. Like a lot. It's a little complex because the change he goes through is a lot. It's not necessarily for entertainment as it is for character reasons, right? So Vin changes a lot. Vin and Spook are in a pretty similar category to me. I think Spook, it's so hard with Vin because I just am holding very particular scenes against her drummer. I think Spook's more than drummer. I'm starting to think drummer needs a little bit more. This feels appropriate. Ka-poel and drummer feels very appropriate, so I think we'll stick with that. Vin, Spook, Waldo. The problem is Waldo, again, he comes into his moments very recently in the series, and so he has, again, that great moment that I would happily reread. He has a few great moments I would happily reread, but he just doesn't have many moments. And it feels wrong to put him higher than Vin and Spook just because he has so much less to compare against. Vin and Spook have a lot more scenes that are like great moments that I'd reread versus Waldo. He just has much less. It is an interesting development though, so I think at the bottom makes sense. And then we have Amos again. Amos is kind of similar to Waldo in many ways, where he's there for most of the time and then he has a few interesting things going on. But the last few books, I mean, really bump him up. the last few books really bump him up. So I think I'll stick with this. Wax or Wayne Spookvin. I think that's fair. All right, next we have Harry Dresden himself from the Dresden Files. By default, he has a badass storyline. The whole series is his story. So if I read 17 books and I didn't like his storyline, I feel like something would be weird here. Harry is a badass storyline, period. I've reread the books. I've reread all the books minimum 4 times. Maximum, like 14 times. We don't talk about that. So obviously I love his story, and I love rereading parts of it all the time. It's really hard. This is where it gets complicated, because technically every scene with Marcone is a scene with Dresden, right? Because the Dresden Files is in first person. And so by all rights, these two characters should be next to each other, because every time Marcone is on screen, Dresden is too. And in that way, Marcone should be like down here by like Wax. Harry. It's really hard for Harry. I don't love every second of Harry. I love most everything. A lot of my problems with Harry is more so the problems with the plot at the time. Okay, hold on. I'm struggling to separate the entire content of the book from the character. If we're talking about Harry as a character, Harry is a character. Harry as a character. I love him. He's a stupid idiot sometimes, but I love him. I love the character he's become. He's grown a lot. He was a little silly in the last short story that came out. You can't read 17 books with a character and not put him in love every second. I mean, technically, again, every second of the series is about his life and his story and how he's developed. So there he is in love every second. Because, yeah, I do love every second Marcone's on the page. However, comparing Marcone versus Kaladin feels very unfair. Kaladin's moments are... Both of them have that same similar big moment, okay? They both have that. Kaladin has a lot of smaller moments. Marcone doesn't. So then that bumps him down one. Then we have versus Thomas. Thomas and Marcone is kind of a fair pairing. They both have their big moments. They have a lot of like the background planning, which is part of what makes them great, is their background stuff. But then both of them against Shallan. Shallan, why do you do this to me? I love your character so much. I love your character so much. But I think we have more to learn. We'll come back to it. Coming back. Taniel from Powder Mage by Brian McClellan. Okay, this is going to be one of those ones where I think society disagrees with me, which is okay. I didn't like Taniel too much. He was a very key part of the plot. You're in his point of view for most of the books. But compared to Adamat and Thomas, it feels crazy to put one of the main characters of a series in the they were there. But also, Taniel was just not... I was not that drawn by his plot. A lot of his plot is, like, talking to his father. Like, a lot of his plot is... And I'm being spoiler-free because this is stuff from Chapter 1 and 2. But it's like, a lot of all his character development is you know, around adapting the environment, but mostly just about the same stuff from the beginning of the book for all 3 books. He grows, but he doesn't. He goes through things, but he is kind of monotone while going through it. It's really his relationship with Pole that I love. Like the chapters with him, I was excited because of Ka-poel. And so Ka-poel's already up here. I think Daniel needed a bit more. I think he's below Alex. Below Vasher. Above Vasher. He does more than Vasher. We'll leave him there for now. We have Breeze from Mistborn Era 1. I was a huge Breeze fan. This is going to be partially biased. It's kind of like Marcone, where it's like, I want to put him way higher than he deserves. Breeze was such a complex character, and you don't see his complexity, which is part of my problem here. I like what gets revealed about him. I love scenes with him. I really do. I would happily reread all the Breeze scenes. Happily. And so, with that said, that makes me want to put him up with Vin. Also, that makes me want to flip Waldo and Amos, because Amos is not a rereadable scene kind of guy. Waldo is. I would reread all the scenes with Waldo. At least, I'd reread a handful of scenes with Waldo. Breeze, I would reread all of his scenes. Vin, I would reread a lot of her scenes. Spook, I would reread some of his scenes. Wayne, I would reread every scene. I love Wayne. Bobby, I'd read every scene with Bobby. Elend. I love Elend. I'd reread all those scenes with Elend, Miller. Well, it's hard to reread every scene with the main character. Shallan, yeah, would. Marcone, already done that. Done that several times. Thomas, done that. Kaladin, I haven't done a reread yet, but I would. I'd happily reread Kaladin's story. So, yeah, we'll put Breeze there. Ham's gonna have to go near Breeze. That's just a reality. If they're usually on the page at around the same time. They are just kind of a pairing. Honestly, Spook, Ham, and Breeze, pretty similar feelings across the board. Spook grows the most, so he is kind of separate from them. But like, I love Breeze more than Ham, but also Ham. All 3 of them are just, yeah, they're kind of in the same realm here, in my opinion. I feel like I like Waldo more than Ham. Ham and Amos are actually very similar characters in many ways, which is very funny. In opposite regards, which is really ironic. I feel like I like Amos more than Ham. No offense, I do love Ham, don't get me wrong, but Amos is kind of more complex there. Oh god. Next we have Szeth, Sun Villano, Truthless of Shinobar, War White. Szeth does not have a lot of screen time. Szeth competes with clubs on screen time, honestly, here. But he's such a complex character. He is immediately in interesting developments by default. He has to be. He just has developments. He has more developments than Bobby. Period. Interesting developments. Bobby Draper, Wayne, Vin, Spook. Vin and Spook both have a lot of developments. The problem is Breeze and Ham don't really have that many developments. They kind of stay the same. They really do. Spook's the one who changes. You know what? No, this is right. This is right. They need more. Both of them need more. I needed more of them. I would have been happy if there was more of them. I think they deserved more. They deserved more. they belong there. They belong next to like Jasnah, right? Where it's like they had so much potential and stuff that could be there, and they're just a little short of it. I think these three, very similar category. And Adolin. Adolin is still like also right there, where it's like Adolin and Ham. Adolin and Ham, Breeze and Jasnah. Like those two pairings, that feels correct. This is like its own Sanderson category right here. And then Drummer. Drummer's pretty similar too. I feel like I'm going to flip Adolin and Ham though. But it's like these two and these two. And then Ka-poel with Drummer. Ka-poel. Alex. Taniel. Alex definitely could have had better developments. The few he had could be better. Vasher, Vivianna. I don't remember these two very well. These last four are all the characters I don't remember very well, so honestly it's fitting for them to be there too. So there's that. Kitai, badass. Love Kitai. Kitai and Elend, very similar category. I like them with each other. I love Kitai more than Elend. But I adore Kitai. Gaius. Alright. Oh, by the way, Kitai's from Codex Alera. Gaius is also from Codex Alera. So Gaius is a complicated character to have on here, because he isn't a main character in the... You don't see him a lot, but he's like Marcone in that his impact on the plot is substantial, right? So these two are actually very similar in that they have great moments that I reread a lot. Like, I reread frequently their moments. And so these two should be next to each other. And again, we got to figure out where they go. That's the problem. I love them both more, if not equal to Kitai, right? Because I love Kitai. I really do. I love her. I love most of her scenes. Miller. This is getting hard. We'll move Gaius and Marcone later. Oh, the next character. We have Fidelius. Okay. Or is it Fidelius? Fidelius? I don't know how to say his name, okay? Love every second. He's going straight to the top category. Fidelius is one of my favorite characters ever written. And it's funny because, again, he's a character. He's not necessarily the main character. He's not the main character. He's like Marcone, where it's like, he's not. One of my favorite characters ever written. Like, it took a bit. Like, book 1, it wasn't quite there. But, like, books 3 through 6, every minute he was on the screen, I was losing my shit. So, he automatically goes up. He goes higher than Dalinar. I don't know about Wit. Wit versus Fidelius is a very complicated issue for me, because they're different. They are very different. But both very complex characters. Very complex characters. And both are well written in a different way. He's just well written in a... It just feels real. Like, he's just a full, complete character. It's so good. So, he has to go up there. I think this is Doxson. I have bad news for Mistborn fans. Doxson is also going down here where I don't remember him. I remember nothing about Doxson. Like, literally, I could not tell you a thing about Doxson except for one particular scene in the second book. So, Doxson is in They Were There, because I don't remember Doxson. I don't. But it's from Mistborn Era 1. Naomi. Naomi Nagata from The Expanse by James S.A. Corey. Naomi has to go in Badass Storyline. She's, again, one of the more complex characters in many ways. She's not lovable, per se. I love her because she's not lovable. It's very complex, my relationship with her storyline. It's definitely higher than Miller's. It's so... Her storyline's heart-wrenching in a way that Wax's is. I'm going to bump her above Wax, though. Because while Wax's is is heavy. Naomi's is heavy in a different way. Not necessarily like an I'm crying way, but like a she has gone through something way. Which is also kind of similar to Shallan. So I feel these three is a pretty appropriate lineup here. I think I love Shallan more than Naomi, but Naomi more than Wax. Or at least Naomi has a similar experience to Wax. So I think this is good. I feel like I should bump Miller down below Kitai, but we'll figure that out later. Marco Inaros from The Expanse. This is a difficult one because he's not like Gaius and Marcone or Fidelius. He's not like any of them. Honestly, I think he's a little flat. I hated him. Okay, here's something I want to clarify. Some of these characters I hate, but in the way that I love it. I love hating them, you know? Nicodemus is one of those characters. I can't remember if I grabbed Nicodemus. I did not grab Nicodemus. Nicodemus would be in the badass storyline section. I hate him. I hate him so much, but I hate him because he's so well written, and that's why he would be in badass storyline. Marco Inaros isn't poorly written, but the kind of person he is, he caused some really big stuff. He caused some developments with a capital ID, interesting development. But at the same time, Drummer was far more interesting to me than Marco Inaros. Alex was more interesting to me than Marco Inaros. Vasher's more interesting. Vivianna is probably more interesting. This is where it gets complicated when you get next to Amara. Marco. I think Marco has more going on than Amara. I can't for the life of me remember what Amara and Bernard do. Like, very honestly. I remember most of the other characters. I don't remember what those two do in the series at all. Other than book 1. I think that's my real problem, is I don't even remember these two characters at all. So I feel like by default he should be higher than that. Marco is a bit more complex than... We'll put him here for now. We'll come back to it. Mab from the Dresden Files. Okay. Work in progress. Above Waldo. We see her more than Waldo. We know more. We know a lot about her. But we're missing a lot of stuff about her, which makes it complex to rate her. But she has interesting developments. We'll come back to it. Szeth. Okay, everyone argues about his name. I called him Szeth, and I realized it's probably Szeth. I love Szeth. Szeth has a badass storyline just from like the twists and turns in it. I will say I hated him for a brief section because this is not a spoiler because this is just my head canon. I was so sure he was like an asexual, aromantic man, or asexual, aromantic, whatever gender, which I realized that Sanderson wasn't going to go with that because Sanderson was still like gendered and you know all those things. But to me, Szeth is like a very queer character in my head, and that's my issue, is I have that image in my brain and that's not really how it worked out. Other than that, like, he has a badass storyline from the reveals at the end. It's going to be more than Elend. It's probably going to be more than Kitai, because it's just such a big deal, Szeth's storyline. Miller versus Szeth, again, very hard to compare, because Miller's a very weird character. But I'll bump Szeth up. Szeth will be under Wax, though, because Wax, again, made me sob like a baby. It's hard to compare here. against that. This is a picture of Karen Murphy. I know it's game very hard to see. This is a picture of Karen Murphy from the Dresden Files. I loved Murphy. I think if I reread the series, I wouldn't love her as much anymore. Murphy's just a character I latched onto in my first read, and I always loved her since. But when you compare her to these people, it doesn't look as promising. Murphy's gonna like be down here, because really compared to a lot of these people, she doesn't have much plot or story or arc to her. She has an arc. It's mostly at the beginning of the series though, and I guess around book 12 she has an arc there, and I love those parts. I really do, but I think she needed more to really push her further, and I think that's why she's written that way. I think that's on purpose. I think that is her arc that we have seen. So she and Tanielle are pretty similar. They both do pretty badass things, and they both have great scenes, but they're just down here of like, I respect them and I will read their scenes, but at the same time, I can't point out like a lot of great stuff. Again, it makes me want to bump Amos down, but I keep remembering the later books that bumps Amos up. So, Molly Carpenter from the Dresden Files. Alright. I'll be very transparent. I hated Molly. I hated Molly the first time I read the series. First time I read the series are the keywords. She has had an arc. She has changed a lot. I judge her a lot less than I used to. It should be noted for both her and Vin that part of my hatred for them was because I read their books at their age. And so I was just frustrated at their age at how they were behaving. That is how I feel about Molly Carpenter. It's like, I'm frustrated at her for some of the choices she made because that's just who she is. And I can't blame her for who she is. That is just part of her character. She is a very complex character. By default, she kind of falls into interesting developments because of all the stuff she goes through in the series. She goes through a lot more than Waldo. Like, a lot more than Waldo. Like, she almost qualifies bumping Waldo down to needs more. Next to Adolin, maybe? I feel pretty similar about Adolin and Waldo. They both need more. They have all the potential. They are lined up. They are perfectly lined up to fulfill exactly what I need. They just haven't yet. That is true for both Adolin and Waldo. So I think this fits. And then Ham under Waldo. Makes sense to me too. They're actually pretty similar. So I like this. Molly versus Amos and Mab. Mostly Molly versus Mab. Mab's more complex. She has more going on. I love her scenes much more. Molly has a very complex storyline, and I have a lot more respect for her storyline. I just don't enjoy her lines or commentary. I don't like her personality, but her story is a lot more. It's kind of similar to Amos. I'm not a huge fan of Amos's personality, but I like how consistent it is. It is very in character of him, and I appreciate that. So, yeah. Isana. Okay. Isana from Codex Alera. Or Isana. I don't even know if the audiobook narrator pronounced that right, because the audiobook narrator, when I listened to it, was not pronouncing the other words correctly. So, I don't think anyone knows how to say it. But Isana, this is kind of tough, because most books, it was, they were there. But then some plot got revealed. And I want to put her above Amara. So, I think bare minimum, she belongs above Amara. I think she belongs above Vivianna. Vivianne. I don't know their name. Vasher, it's getting complicated there. I feel like Vasher more. Okay. We have Michael Carpenter from the Dresden Files. Interesting developments. Quick, easy, bam, that's it. Interesting developments. We have Adamat from Powder Mage. I wanted him to have more. I wanted him to have more. Adamat's one of those characters that it's like Ham, where it's like I liked him. I liked his scenes, and there was some really cool plot that came with him. But Adamat himself isn't interesting. It's more so the plot around him that's interesting. So, like, his character arc, I guess you don't really know much about Adamat's character because most of the story he's more so caring about other people and solving his mystery, being an investigator. And so you don't really get much of Adamat's personality in the book. You get Taniel's personality, you get Ka-poel's, you get Thomas's, but not really Adamat's. So I feel like putting him circa Drummer, where they both have like badass plot and cool stuff happening and they do important things, but they're not like personality interesting or like dialogue interesting. I think that's pretty accurate for the two of them. Their dialogue isn't interesting. In that way, Ka-poel is higher, which is ironic because she doesn't have dialogue, but Ka-poel is higher because she's more interesting as a character. But she has less going on plot-wise, so, yeah. Alright, this is Clarissa Mao from The Expanse. She was there. I never was a big Clarissa fan. I wish I could say why. I just wasn't. I respect them for doing her plot. I really do. She's just not interesting to me. Her plot, her story wasn't interesting to me. That is the reality of it. Pretty much all the aspects of her story I like have been moved to Amos. And I like Amos. And that feels really rude, but Clarissa Mao just wasn't that interesting to me. She has an arc. She really does. She has interesting developments. Just not for me. We have Tavi from Codex Alera. He's going to be right next to Kitai because a lot of them are together. I like Kitai more than Tavi in many ways, but some parts of Tavi's story are pretty damn good. I gotta say, some parts of Tavi's story are pretty damn good, so I'll put Tavi above Kitai. Avasarala from The Expanse. I love her so much. I love her so much. She's so hard to compare to all these people because if you look at a lot of these characters are fighters or are around fighters. Avasarala is a politician, right? A lot of these characters are not politicians, so it's hard to compare a politician to these other characters in any regard. I love her though. She's kind of like Szeth, where like their lines are like pristine. I love their lines. I love their dialogue, what they say. They say some very meaningful things. I'm just gonna do this for now, just to even this out a little bit. Avasarala and Szeth and Miller. Oh, Miller's got to step down. It's got to happen. All right, we'll come back to these three at the bottom here. I don't know what's going on with them. It's really hard. Avasarala and Szeth, I can see the comparison now that I've said it. Naomi versus Avasarala. Naomi has more of a story than Avasarala. Avasarala has peak dialogue and brings a lot to the table. Szeth goes through about as much as Avasarala. That's very hard to say. They go through very different things, but they're both experiencing things. We'll leave it for now. We'll come back. Holden. I'm thinking about the later books. The first few books versus the later books, very different. Holden has interesting developments. He's pretty similar to Michael. I think that's fair to say. I like Holden more than Amos. I like Michael more than Amos. In terms of the character's development and story, Michael's story versus Amos's story. Amos is more of a mystery, so we give it to Michael. Michael versus Holden seems very fair to me. Molly has a lot more of a story than both of them, so we're good. That's Kelsier, and then all of these are all from the Belgariad because I randomly remembered to add the Belgariad in the middle of this video. So we have Garyon himself first. Garyon, oh, it's been 5 years. I guess it's been like 4 years since I read the Belgariad. 3.5 maybe. I wish I remember these characters better. Garyon. Oh, I forgot Sinedra. I just realized I forgot Sinedra. Well, we'll put her at the end. Garyon had interesting developments, obviously. He's the main character. Like, the main character. I didn't like him that much, though. I won't even lie. I think that's my problem with YA. If you notice a common theme, I hated Vin, I hated Garyon, and I hated Molly. All the teenagers. I hate the teenagers. The common theme here. Sinedra is going to be in needs a little more, by the way. I can tell you right now. Sinedra is going to be down here or in They Were There. I was not a Sinedra fan. I never liked her at any point, really. I think you can go back and watch my reviews and see me rant about her. I did not like Sinedra. I don't have fond memories of Sinedra. So, I would put her in They Were There, probably next to Clarissa and Mal. They're pretty similar in some regards. So, that is Garyon. Aunt Pole, badass storyline. Love Aunt Pole. Love her so much. And then McGrath, also badass storyline. Love him so much. They're going to be especially these two. Gaius and McGrath slash what did I say his name is? McGrath. I know that's his full name. I can't remember what the name I just said he was. His name's McGrath. McGrath and Gaius are going to be next to each other. And Aunt Pole is pretty damn close. Aunt Pole is like one step below McGrath. I think this is Barak. Yes, that's Barak. Barak, he needed more. He needed more. He's like... Oh my god. He's like lower than Asana. He's lower than... He's like towards the bottom of needs a little more. He had like some cool stuff about him, but like just not enough. Silk, on the other hand, had interesting developments. I rather liked Silk. I like Silk a lot. Silk and Vin had like a lot in common. But the thing is, Silk throughout the series had more and more revealed about him, and I loved having all that revealed. So I think like Silk next to Mab is very appropriate to me. Again, difficult to compare to Molly because Molly has a very complex story that just changes a lot. Like, she just goes through so much shit. Silk doesn't go through a lot of shit, but I loved his character, and I love rereading his scenes, so that puts him higher. It just does. I don't like Molly. I hate Molly. So, do I like Silk or Mab more? That's very complicated. I like both. For similar reasons, weirdly, even though they're very different characters. We'll come back to it. I believe this is Dernick, who's the last person, because this is another picture of Kelsier. Dernick needed more. They tried to reveal stuff about him in the later books, and I did respect that. Some of it was good, but he was just kind of... For a prophecy series that's all about the prophecy, right? That's what Belgariad is about, is the prophecy. The time between his prophecy being told and being revealed, a little bit too tight, let's be honest. So he needs a little more. He needed more. All right, now we have to rearrange everything. Love every second. Characters that I love every second they're on the page. They're some of the best written characters I've ever read. Wit, 100%. Fidelius, 100%. Those are like my top 2 favorite characters. Dalinar, love every second. Yeah, I do. I love every second Dalinar. I love everything his story stands for. He's such a key part of the stories. And I assume the next 2 books are just going to solidify that. I think Dalinar belongs up there. I think Harry is very different and very similar to Dalinar. I think Harry... Yeah. I mean, I love him. He is one of my favorite characters. He is a very complex character in a way. It's funny because he's very predictable and complex. So it's great. Kaladin. Love every second or badass storyline. Kaladin has a badass storyline. I would reread a lot of moments, like more than 6 moments. But I don't love every second he's on the screen. I think there are some chapters that drag out with him. Some things he do that drags it out, that aren't as interesting. I think book 1, I would put him in love every second. The whole series, I would put him in badass storyline, which is a very interesting distinction. But I think that is the truth for me. I think Thomas is very similar to Kaladin. They both have great moments. Kaladin has a few more. Kaladin has a deeper meaning going on. Shallan also has a deeper meaning going on, which is what makes it complicated comparing against Thomas, because some of Thomas's scenes are brilliant. Thomas and Tavi belong next to each other. They have very similar like militaristic moments where their brilliance is what I love about their characters, how smart they think, how they approach problems, and how they discuss. So I love Thomas and Tavi for the same reason. Kaladin, Shallan. Love for different reasons. Shallan's a very complex character, so again, it's hard to put her in here. Naomi's a complex character. Almost similar to Shallan-ish. Wax. They're all dealing with the past. Avasarala. And Szeth. God. Thing is, Szeth is a background character for the first book. But so is Avasarala in a way. She's a politician. Tavi. I do not like Avasarala more than Kitai, Thomas, and Tavi. I also like Tavi, Thomas, Kitai more than Szeth. That is the truth. Tavi versus Wax. Ooh, that's really hard. Wax made me cry. He made me cry so bad. But at the same time, Tavi... This is so difficult. Oh, man. I'm bumping Miller down. I'm bumping Garrian down, that's gonna be I'm gonna have to defend that later, but we'll get there. Give me a second. I am processing. In terms of how well written their storyline is, because this category is badass storyline versus love every second. Szeth's storyline is very complex and badass and well written. Very well written. Avasarala's storyline, it's more the plot around her, not her, you know? She's very entertaining. She's very entertaining. but it's her environment, not her. She has interesting developments. I think this is appropriate. I think her and Miller are in a pretty similar spot, weirdly. We'll come back to that, though. I'm starting to question if Elend is up here. Because I love Elend. But I'm trying to think of what... this is just poor memory. I'm trying to think of what he does in the third book. I think the third book, Elend was kind of... That's where Elend kind of lost me. For part of it. But I don't remember well. I think these 4 characters are more badass than Elend. All of them. Like, all 4 of these characters have some really badass moments that I love and adore, and I can recall them, but I can't recall a badass moment with Elend off the top of my head. I think Elend has interesting developments. Under Miller. Elend has interesting developments, but I'm not coming up with badass moments for him. Yeah, I think that's appropriate. I think I love him like an equal amount to like Wayne. Or, yeah, I'd love him an equal amount to Wayne. So, we'll get back to that. So then, confirm that all of these characters have bad storyline. Kaladin, yes. Shallan, yes. Naomi, yes. Wax, yes. Tavi, yes. Thomas, yes. Kitai, yes. Szeth, yes. I think Szeth is one of the more complicated here. It's hard to find a place for Szeth. Marcone, Gaius, Belgrath, and Ka-poel. All 4 of them, more so side characters. However, all 4 of them have really badass moments where I'd reread every moment. I'd reread every one of their scenes. So, yeah. I wouldn't reread every one of Szeth's moments, though. Well, most of them. I'd reread most of them, just not certain ones from book 2. So, and Szeth, son Vellano, truthless of Shinovar, should be bumped next to Szeth. I think Szeth and Szeth are pretty similar, which is a flaw in Sanderson's part to have their names spelled similarly. But I think Szeth and Szeth are very similar. Interesting developments. Miller has some of the most interesting developments out of everyone here. Elend has some interesting developments. Avasarala has some interesting developments. Bobby has some interesting developments. Because she's Bobby. She hasn't changed too much, though. It's almost like Bobby and Amos are near each other. Wayne, very interesting developments. Mab, Silk. Mab and Silk are interesting. Vin goes through a lot. Spook goes through a lot. Molly goes through a lot. Mab and Silk are more entertainment. Holden and Michael and Amos and Bobby are all kind of flat characters that are going through a lot of plot. I need more Jasnah. I need more Breeze. I need more Adolin. I need more Waldo. I need more Ham. Garyon is below Murphy, that's for damn sure. Garyon's below Marco, for me. I just didn't like Garyon. I just don't like teenagers. I don't know what's up with me. Something's wrong with me. Vasher, Asana. We'll just put him with the other Belgariad characters here, next to Durnik. Alright. That's it. No more. We're done. We're done. This is the completed version. Just know I want to put this man up here. I won't, but know that I do. Because I do reread every one of his scenes. I do love every second he's on the screen. I just feel it is wrong to put him with these 4. Because he just doesn't have that much screen time comparatively. So I won't. But he is very similar to Gaius in that they both have, like, fantastic scenes that I would reread over and over again, but they only show up occasionally. Alright, with all that said, What's new and what's next? I am currently reading Rhythm of War. What is next after Rhythm of War? Wind and Truth. It's going to be a very emotional few weeks. I will probably be crying when I record one of those videos. We'll see which one. So that's what's next. And then what is new? I bought the collectible edition of a book. I shouldn't have, and I did. This is the second book of The Expanse that I bought the collectible edition for, and it looks so fucking good. Not to be shady to whoever did the art of the original copies, but I don't like these. I'll be very honest. I don't. I in fact dislike them, mostly because the spines don't match, which really annoys me. So I got the collectible version. To justify myself, this is the first ever sci-fi series I've ever read. And so it is meaningful to me because it is the first sci-fi series I've ever read. And it also just looks better. And I got it on sale. So, I have more books on the way, but I don't have them currently, so I guess I'll just show them for Rhythm of War whenever I finish that. But, collectible edition. I'm going to try to get them all. Currently, only 3 of them are out, so it's a work in progress. And I believe that is it. As for, I'll update y'all on what's after Brandon Sanderson when I finish Brandon Sanderson. I can't promise anything because Wind and Truth is fucking long. It's going to be the longest book I've ever read by a lot. That book is insanely long, so I'll see y'all when that comes around. Bye!